Hello, Huddlers. Welcome to today's Bonus Huddle. I'm thrilled to introduce you to Ryan Koonce, who is the founder of Growth Bench and a real expert on marketing technology. Ryan has recently completed an extensive analysis of 100 websites from our CMO Huddles community, examining the tech stacks that power our members' digital presence. And it's really interesting time to be talking about this because we're at this inflection point where with marketing technology, with generative AI reshaping everybody's capabilities, you're looking at it differently. And we, of course, have this issue of budgets being under scrutiny. So, is it time to be swapping things out? Is it time to invest more in a single platform to try to get economies? There's a lot of questions out there. So Ryan's going to share some insights on where marketers may be overspending, where crucial investments are being missed, and how to prepare for the Gen AI future. Particularly looking forward to that part that's rapidly becoming our present. With that, Ryan, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, and where are you and how are you this fine day?
I am in San Francisco, California,
Okay.
and it is still pretty early here, and this fine day is going exceptionally well.
Awesome. All right. Well, so we do this on all these conversation, which is before we dive in case the audience needs to leave early or we need to convince them to stay for the full session. Could you share three big observations from your tech stack study and just give me the highlight because we'll go through those. And these are observations that you think CMOs really need to care about or pay attention to.
Yeah, sure. I guess the first one is probably that as we analyze the stacks of 100 companies from the Huddler group, Salesforce still dominates. HubSpot is gaining traction fast. But I think one of the things that we can talk about today is how AI is changing that calculus pretty quickly.
Okay, that's
Um,
one.
uh, Number two, it looks like everybody has Google Analytics. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is if you are reporting to the board from Google Analytics data, why you're kind of flying blind and you might not know it. So that's number two.
Oh, cool.
And then number three is it seems like the sort of attribution tool stack is all over the place and people are doing it a bunch of different ways. And so whether you're PLG or SLG, we can talk a little bit about how you can connect the dots on that front.
Okay, and just in case we have someone who's actually listening who's new to the PLG is product-led growth, SLG is sales-led growth. Okay, let's go through those one at a time because it's really interesting. So, yeah, Salesforce. We did a survey, my guess is 70% of our community is on Salesforce, and maybe 30% is on HubSpot. But you see that this dynamic could change as a result of AI. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, we're just seeing the economics around HubSpot and Salesforce affect the market where Salesforce is expensive and, expensive not only to buy, but also to operate. And we're also seeing this sort of massive, this doesn't affect the marketing team probably directly, but, with the advent of AI-based BDRs, AI-based outreach and some of these other things, the, Salesforce ecosystem may or may not support that in the way that we expect. And so companies are starting to migrate to HubSpot. And then I think in that process, they're rethinking what is available to them in their stack. And kind of it's opening up options to everything because Salesforce is so entrenched, you just expect it to be the foundation. And if that changes, then it could be anything. It doesn't have to be HubSpot. It could be some of these new tools.
Oh, it's so interesting because I mean, it's kind of like there's this moment where, well, you're a real company when you have Salesforce, yet everybody seems to hate it.
Well, let me tell you something that's even crazier. If you take the modern MarTech stack,
Right.
and we think about things that are not Salesforce or Adobe, okay? And if you add up all the revenue of any company you can think of, so think about all the new CDPs, all the analytics solutions, all the LCM solutions, all the attribution solutions, all the conversion rate optimization solutions, A/B testing solutions. If you add up all their revenue in aggregate, it's still less than Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Okay, so there's
Yeah.
something broken there, but that's probably beyond the scope of this conversation.
Right. But it does. So if you're moving to a new organization as a CMO and you're thinking about, well, we're on Salesforce, but we're not that big, it might still be time to change. This is kind of a moment where that could be a big opportunity. Uh, and it's funny, the challenge with any of these softwares, particularly Salesforce, is it's only as good as the people who are using it. And I don't think this one problem that everybody talks about in our community, which is salespeople never put in the right data or keep it clean, so you have bad data to start with. I don't think that has anything to do with Salesforce.
It doesn't have anything to do with Salesforce, but it has to do with the way that data is stored. And so when we think about data accessibility in the organization and well, it's available, it's accurate, reliable, and consistent data, right? And so, is Salesforce the best place to be the, source of truth for the organization? The answer is probably no. And so we're seeing this sort of massive, shift to, BigQuery and Databricks and Snowflake and medallion modeling and providing people with an opportunity to sort of normalize that data in a way that, is happening now faster than ever.
uh, Amazing. Okay, so that's one big thing, and we'll probably come back to that in a second, but let's go through the second point of Google Analytics. Yes, I don't think I know of a single company that doesn't use Google Analytics. And you use the term flying blind. Why is that, and what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so if you take a business that has auditable data trail where you're tracking user journeys and you're able to bind visits and activities to specific users and to specific companies, and you try and match it to Google Analytics, you'll be very frustrated. And maybe some of you have tried this before. It's like, well, it's not, doesn't match Google, which one is right? And the problem is it's always Google that's wrong. And so that's a big leap for people to take because you can take something that's auditable and you can verify that it's right. And you can take something like Google Analytics, which is often wrong. By the way, usually not in the same direction every day. And you can't tell why it's wrong, right? And so I think there's this leap of faith that you have to take at some point, which is, hey, maybe this thing that, is tracking all of our data that Google has access to might not be the thing that I want to run my business on.
Okay.
And yeah,
Well, I just have to stop you there for a second because I think that's a moment of truth here for everybody listening to this that we've been thinking. We can look at our Google Analytics data and we think of it as truth. And what you're saying is it's not. And that's
empirically wrong every day.
empirically wrong every day. And yet, pretty much every single stack that you looked at had Google Analytics. And because of, it's free for most. So, but it's not accurate. Okay, so we're going to have to come back to that, but I do want to. So obviously you have a solution in mind for that. So let's just go there. What is the? I mean, because you can't do attribution tracking, you can't do journey mapping if you start with bad data.
That's right. And so I think most modern companies are doing some version of a CDP on the front end for their website for the Google type analytics, and then the variety of tools you can use once you have that data collection layer is there's tons of them, right? And
Lots of
so
tools.
how do I use first party cookies to identify users and track events over time, where I can bind those user sessions across devices and then provide the data in a warehouse that can be audited against other known truths. So when you think about conversion metrics or you think about cost metrics, there's a way to add everything up. And I think one of the big components to that is just having that auditability provides a level of clarity and sort of a foundational insight that you're not going to get from Google Analytics.
Got it. And just remind us what CDPs are.
Okay, sorry. CDP is a customer data platform. So you
Right.
can think about things like Segment or Telium or RudderStack or High Touch. Salesforce has this, CDP. Everybody seems to be a CDP today. We could do, multi-hour conversation about what that really means. But fundamentally, it's I can identify users and track events, and I can bind user sessions across devices and over time.
And even without being a tech or a techie, it's easy to understand based on what you're saying that this allows you to connect the dots because you have accurate data from the get-go. And that's so interesting. Okay, the third one was attribution. right? And we talked about that. Let's just make sure we covered that in terms of the issue and the opportunity from an attribution standpoint.
Same issue as Google Analytics in some ways, in that, if you don't have a foundational data collection strategy that you can use to bind things, say, for a visit to a website that ultimately results sometime downstream as a closed one in Salesforce or HubSpot or whatever, if you don't have that entire customer journey, not only as an individual, but as an account, then it's going to be very, very hard to reconcile these things. And I think a lot of marketers that we talk to have a lot of tools and a lot of information that they're trying to bind together that doesn't tell the full story. And so an example for the product-led growth people might be a developer signs up on the site, starts a free trial, likes the free trial, invites the finance guy signs up for an account, ends up putting in a credit card and starts paying monthly. And so on an individual basis, the person that clicked the links and did the activity to become a customer, the developer, looks like they had no revenue. Whereas you have a guy, the finance person, who came in from an invite, which, by the way, maybe wasn't even tracked, has an account now and has revenue. And so it looks like there's all this direct traffic that's driving revenue when in fact it wasn't that person at all. And so that's the case with the sort of product-led growth problem. And then sales-led growth is even more complicated because you have, webinars and events and other things. And how do we track these different components? We have multiple salespeople maybe and multiple stakeholders that are being tracked through a pipeline in Salesforce. And so we need to be able to look at these cohorts of time because the closed one might be 6 months from now, right? And so how do we think about predicted revenue against our marketing spend? And how do we think about binding some closed one opportunity further down the line back to the actual activity that drove that closed one? And so those are things I think today that if we have that sort of data foundation and we talk about data sync between systems that we can do that, just becomes less nebulous.
Okay, so if we're going to summarize this portion of it, it's like, don't just assume Salesforce is the answer, part one. Two,
Or one.
Google Analytics is a problem, not a solution. And three, you need better tech to really think through and track the connect the dots here. And what we're really talking about, the whole purpose, or I shouldn't say, one of the best purposes, and I probably should ask this as a question, of a tech stack is that it helps you build a predictable, reliable, measurable growth engine, right? That's why we have these things. And yet, when you look at it foundationally, you say Salesforce is a mess. The way the data is going in the mess. Google Analytics is a mess. There's like no hope for success already.
Well, I think it's a matter of taking Google. Let's set Google Analytics aside because it's
Fine.
useless. But if you take Salesforce, which everybody has, and you take some of these other tools that we looked at in the stack, which cover a huge wide array of tools, most of these tools are pretty good. And so, for example, when we go into a company, everybody always wants to rip out the thing that they already have. And that's usually not the answer. The answer is usually, let's just fix the thing that you have. And the reason is it's not a tool problem. It's a sync problem. So we have data and the data doesn't line up across these different systems. That's something that's a solvable problem. And so I think the key is not necessarily throwing the baby out with the bathwater because that's a pretty big lift. But going into the root of the problem and providing sort of a foundational infrastructure for data sharing and data sync, which by the way often ends up happening in the warehouse today.
Interesting. Okay, so I think that's really important. So we're not going to throw Salesforce away if we have it. We're just probably not using it optimally, and the dots are not connected. So this is a lot of plumbing. And now, but aren't the RevOps teams and the marketing op teams, isn't that their job? Isn't that what they're supposed to be taking care of? So the CMO doesn't have to look at it and they get a nice, pretty dashboard that shows them what they're doing.
It would be awesome if they talked together.
What do you
It'd be
mean?
awesome if the RevOps team talked to the marketing ops team, right?
Okay,
So I think you end up with data silos, right? It's not marketing data or product data or sales data or finance data or ops data. It's customer data and company data. And so we have to start treating it like that. And we have to start treating these tools like they aren't just sort of random appendages to the company. And so we want to look at a customer and we want to know that I have the data for that customer in all of these places. And by the way, by doing that, I can start to consolidate how I think about leveraging the tools in these places, right? And so, yes, a lot of RevOps teams, a lot of marketing ops teams, a lot of different systems and tools. And even within those teams, it's the Marketo person and it's the, Salesforce person. And then you have a Salesforce consultancy and you have all the things, right? And so how are you doing data governance and how are you coordinating between all these systems? I think that's where a lot of companies break down.
Right. I mean, the thing that you mentioned earlier, and I just want to make sure put a nice little bow on that is, you've got the person who is interested in using this product or service in the PLG model. They come in, they sign up for the free trial, and they like it, and then but they're not going to put the credit card in. They're going to let the finance person. A lot of folks talk about account-based marketing and bringing this account together, but it feels like there's fundamentally this problem is that you're saying those two entities just don't get connected.
Yeah, and so it's sort of what is and again, going into sort of this vocabulary in the company. If we ask an executive team to write down the definition of revenue or lifetime value or customer or conversion, which is a trick question, fundamentally you'll get a bunch of different answers. And so even the vocabulary in the company, there aren't canonical definitions of the things that matter, where I might be saying revenue and you might be saying revenue. We're actually saying two different things. And so, that's there's a foundational sort of people process technology problem where, it's not just about the technology. Again, it's sort of funny. We talked about when we were, contemplating this podcast. I said, look, we've done over 1,000 engagements, and almost always, if I talk to an executive and they tell me their stack, I can tell them what their problem is. And it turns out when we were going through this exercise, there's like this massive full factorial of companies and their technology. But the common theme is that the data in the technologies that they have doesn't sync together. And the vocabulary that the executives have maybe isn't the same. And those two things are things that are pretty easy to solve.
And you put together a great deck. And for anybody listening or here with us, if you want a copy of the deck, just put it in chat or send us a note at support@cmohuddles.com. And so, literally, you talk about this data. All of these problems are data sync problems. So, when it looks good, what's happening, and and we've talked, I think, about a failure, but what's success look like when you're talking about data syncing?
Yeah, definitely. I think the data sync doesn't remove the fact that there are some tools that do things easier than other tools, but you also have to incorporate the human equation. For example, if there's a new tool and no one in the company knows how to use it, and it's not going to get used, right? So I think that's an important component to this. What great looks like is that one, data entry happens in an accurate way. And so, we can throw the sales teams under the bus for this. They're notoriously bad. I see a world where AI is going to start fixing some of those things. And we're not there yet, but we're on the verge of autocorrect and, sort of the proctor screaming at the salesperson as they're entering data because it doesn't look like it's supposed to look. So I think that's going to be a solved problem pretty soon. I think the idea that companies have a data warehouse and the data warehouse isn't blocked by a data team. Because of things like AI, we have this concept of DBT, medallion modeling, that we can use to quite frankly, go around the data team if we need to as a marketing team, right? You put in your request, it comes back God knows when. And so, great looks like getting data, the right data, the data that you need quickly. And when I say quickly, I mean, basically less than a week. Okay. Bad companies take more than a week. Great companies, which there aren't that many, like 1%, it's sort of real time, full access to data availability, all the data you need at all the times, right? And that's really empowered by some of this AI stuff. And then it's really just a matter of benchmark, test, and optimize on top of the data that you have. And so if you're not benchmarking, you're just sort of blasting and praying on emails, or you're just putting up landing pages without understanding what the benchmark is. Having the information at your fingertips allows you to leverage these tools in the right way. And so if we're benchmarking and testing and optimizing, we can always make it better.
All right, like with everything in marketing, in any aspect of it, better data always is leads to better outcomes. Uh, I love this notion that you're right. It's easy to imagine an AI, if you will, supervisor that says, you know, that data doesn't sound right. And by the way, I just checked the company name against our database, and you spelled it wrong. And so can I? And so it feels like we are going to get to a place where the agents can help the humans get this data right.
Yeah, the agents are here. It's just a matter of which one do we pick.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna live in a world soon where AI will help with the quality of data. I the benchmarking of all of this is so important, and I just want to remind folks that for all your tech initiatives, having a benchmark, and particularly this is true for AI initiatives. It's like, what is your workflow now? How many hours does it take you to do this? Okay, now can we create a AI-based workflow that shortens that by 20%? But if you can only do the 20% if you had the benchmark to begin with. So that all makes sense. And again, I think the key here is I don't our goal is not to get the CMO to do this, but our goal in this call is to make sure that the CMO knows what great looks like and sounds like so that they can ask the questions of their marketing ops and their rev ops teams, that to do this. So unfettered access, you talked about that. Um, what's that going to look like?
Well, I think to your point, the first thing is just feeling empowered to put your foot down when you don't have what you need. I think it's we run into companies so often where the marketing team is so frustrated because the tech team or the engineering team is blocking the things that they need. It could be adding tags to a site. It could be, building reports in a dashboard. It could be implementing a new tool. And I think, one of the things that we always try and do is empower the marketing team to, really take hold of the outside of the the political ramifications of that, like take hold of the responsibility to make all these things available to them. And so the truth is we're able to do that now more than ever, and the reason that we can do that now is because the the warehouse has become a more central place for syncing all of these things together. And by doing that, you kind of like don't need a bunch of people in between, right? You need somebody that has access to the warehouse, and you need the ability to sync these things into the warehouse. But the tools are becoming sophisticated enough where you can do that without a big engineering team. And so there are ways to sidestep sort of the confusion that happens in companies and these sort of power dynamics that happened around data. Because remember, data is political. At the end of the day, not everyone wants to be measured. And so those are things that you need to keep in mind as you bring the truth to the surface.
Not everyone wants to be measured. Okay. So we've got our data warehouse. It's got good data in it. The CMOs have access to it. It's funny because a number of folks in our community have become like they're now responsible for pipeline. Well, they clearly could not do that job if they didn't have access to the data, where they could be asked to do it, but they couldn't do it, right? Because you can't look at it. And you talked earlier about the timing of all this. I mean, we all know that if there's an engineer in there playing with your product and using it and so forth, that's a hot moment. I mean, and so timing does matter. And if you can't access the data, it's a problem. I,
We've reached, yeah, go ahead.
no, I ran out of smoke.
No. So what I was going to say is, okay, so here's the future. We'll jump forward a little and then come back.
Good.
So, one of the things we're seeing is in the old world, when you think about data and you think about engineering and you think about pulling these things together, you had to put a request in maybe to the analytics team or the data team, and somebody would have to go into the warehouse and create a table and write some SQL, and then some point in the future, some report would show up. Okay, and that process can take weeks, like actually. One of the new things that we're seeing, and in particular, Mammoth Growth is doing this. We can basically leverage AI agents to do all the work of the data engineering team. So literally, you put in a request into a Zoom chat, it transcribes it into a business requirements document, which creates all the Jira tickets, which creates all the DBT models, which writes all the code. And so now you say to the engineering team, say, oh, that's going to take you 3 weeks. You know what? We're just going to like get it done tomorrow. So don't worry about it. Keep doing what you're doing. And the marketing team now is can kind of do whatever they want because they're not blocked by the engineering sort of legacy process that exists in these companies. And so, in a sense, and again, this is a change management issue. It's not a technology issue as much as it is to say, hey, marketing team, you can be your own data team now. You don't actually need the data team. You just need access to the data, and that's a massive leap from where we were even at the end of last year.
Yeah, and I be your own data team. I love that notion. And certainly I suspect CMOs would leap for joy if they could do it. So how many is this real? Are any of CMOs actually doing this?
Yeah, it's only been possible since December when the new reasoning engines were released. It's only gotten better since then, and it's evolved. I get a demo every Friday, and every week I'm blown away across the board. And so we're reaching this point where, uh, you know, like many IC jobs, their data engineering or analytics engineering jobs are going to sort of not exist at the end of the year.
Okay.
That's
All
great
right.
for
Well,
CMOs because now you can sort of just get what you want without all the waiting.
sounds very promising. I'm sure some of the folks listening on this call are wondering, you know, probably could have some thoughts on the barriers that they're running into and the change management issues. But let's keep moving down this. We've got our data warehouse. What are the sort of common mistakes you're seeing when it comes to data warehousing, modeling, and maybe using things like Snowflake and others?
Yeah, so it doesn't matter what your warehouse is as long as it's a modern warehouse. I think that's one of the things that we're seeing is that if you have Snowflake or BigQuery or Databricks, you're sort of set up for success. You just have to leverage the tool in the right way, and it really needs to become a central part of the stack. So if you have Salesforce data needs to land in the warehouse. If you have Marketo data or CDP data or site data or whatever needs to land in the warehouse. We use this terminology called medallion modeling, and so that data that lands in the warehouse is going to be kind of messy. You might even have revenue from multiple places. You have Stripe revenue and PayPal revenue and closed one invoice revenue. Well, that revenue needs to turn into something that somebody like you as a marketer can use. And we call that sort of medallion modeling. And so you turn what we call the bronze model, this garbage of data, into a silver model, which is sort of filtered and cleaned and aggregated. And then that gets put into a gold model. That model is what you're going to use to take advantage of that and all the other tools and all the systems. So revenue is now revenue. It's not PayPal revenue and Stripe revenue and invoice revenue. It's just revenue. And that revenue has a canonical definition that everybody can use in the company. So that process of getting the data into that place is becoming easier and easier and easier. And that's the thing now that you can leapfrog from where we were yesterday. And then it's just a matter of taking advantage of it. So where am I going to leverage the data and what tools am I going to use it in order to do better testing, send better emails, uh, you know, complete, more events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's the foundational element that you can now take advantage of.
Okay, so I want to put this in a series of questions that CMOs could be asking, whether it's RevOps or marketing ops or a combined group. We've got our CDP in the middle, and let's say we're about to bring on Clay for whatever reason. We've decided that we need just better data enrichment or whatever. So we're considering this new tool. Is it yes? Does it integrate with our CDP? I mean, what are the questions that they need to do to make sure that you're going to get to medallion modeling?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that that's a great point, which is the strategy matters. So you have to have an opinion about how you're going to use Clay. Clay isn't just going to magically work for you, right? It does all these incredible things. And I think the first thing is, as a business, what is your outreach strategy going to be? And then how can we use Clay to take advantage of that strategy? To be honest, the first part of Clay doesn't have to sync with the warehouse. Clay does it all for you. But what you're going to want to know is, what did I do with Clay? And how does it impact these other systems that I'm tying these users into? So does Clay go into the CRM? Does it then go into a sort of web onboarding process? Does it go into some other funnel that you've designed? And so the point of the warehouse and the data sync isn't that it's going to drive the strategy that you're using in Clay. It's going to allow you to know that the thing you did in Clay actually worked or didn't work.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, because I feel like every single software that you bring in has its own sort of dashboard and metrics
Yeah.
evaluation. And that's the problem, right? That's a part of this problem.
I think that we talk about this idea that, you spend $5 for a click on Google and $5 for a click on Facebook, and you make $8, right? And Google says you made three, and Facebook says you made three, but you lost two. It's not that Google and Facebook are like overtly trying to screw you. It's just that they don't know what the other systems did. Okay. And so I think you could say the same thing about Clay, and you can say the same thing about most of these technologies. If the sync isn't overt, they're just operating within the vacuum. They don't know what your other system is. And that's actually part of the issue. There's so many systems. I mean, even if you look at the 100 huddlers that we looked at, it wasn't like, sure, everybody had Salesforce or HubSpot or something like that. But then you get into this like really deep, expansive set of CDPs or analytics tools or whatever. And, it's hard to keep those things for any one company to build all the, direct syncs, together because they don't know what all their customers are going to have. And so I think that's where having a CDP or taking advantage of the warehouse as the sink, does become an opportunity. And then also remember, use data where it's needed. So you want to sync the data, but like for certain things in Clay, you don't need another system. You don't have to take the effort. The cost of getting data matters too. And I think those are things that, are certainly worth keeping in mind.
Okay. So on the fifth page of your deck, you talk about this notion of speed to insight framework. And it's funny because a lot of the folks we've been talking about from a messaging standpoint, particularly in a down economy, if you're selling software, frankly, you're selling anything in B2B right now, speed to value is a really important concept to understand and make clear to your customer. So here we're turning it around and just saying, if you're bringing on a new piece of software or whatever, your goal as the CMO is to get your insights as fast as you can. Talk about this framework and how you sort of analyze stack performance, bad, good, great. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I think every company has, I wouldn't say I've ever seen a standardized reporting framework in companies. Every company has different ways of running BI teams or analytics teams or reporting within marketing or outside of marketing or in product or outside of product, et cetera. We view the way to think about measuring your efficacy on the time it takes you to get the answer you need. That's the most important answer to move the needle on your business. So first of all, not all data is created equal. There are things that if you get the answer to, they're going to matter more than other things. And what we find is that because executives often don't have clean, accurate, reliable, consistent, accessible data, they're constantly lobbing in requests to the analytics team. It's almost like they're just grabbing for anything that they can get. Like, just give me data. I don't have anything. I'm frustrated. I can't run my business. And so, that's bad. So there's two sides to that. So the first thing is the analytics team is basically getting piled up with requests, and they don't know how to prioritize those requests because every request from a VP is important, even though they're not. And so the first thing is, how do you prioritize the request so that you can get the response back to the thing that's most important most quickly? And so we think about like bad being anything over a week is too long. I mean, you can't run your business if you have a weekly turnaround on data, usually. Okay. And so, one way to solve that is technology, is to say, look, you need to have more data engineers, or you need to have a better warehouse or better pipelines or better things. And the other way is just to ask better questions and prioritize those questions for the team in a way that they can go after the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. So that's the first thing. Should I stop there? We should keep going.
Yeah, let's stop there because it's so interesting. I mean, it immediately made me think of, all right, there are a lot of questions, there's a lot of data, and sometimes you don't know what you don't know. You don't know how the different slices might yield a story that you were looking for. Sometimes you're trying to get the data to confess something that you think is true. It feels like, though, if you were to, for example, go into ChatGPT and completely describe your data set and your tools and everything, and then you said, give me the top 10 questions that I could ask in order to get the most value out of my queries every week. I feel like you'd get in some interesting start, but here you are the expert. What are those questions, the better questions?
Well, I think I'll give you what's a bad question.
Okay, bad question.
I went into a business, and this was before COVID. We showed up at the office, and they had this like beautiful mind, sticky note button color test, up on the wall, and they were going to test all the button colors everywhere. Okay, and we immediately were able to convince them that that probably wasn't the best use of their time, right? And so, I think there are things that come up that are, again, grasping at straws because you don't have any foundational information. And so I think the first thing is, what are those foundational benchmarks that you have to know in order to run your business? And if those aren't good, that's the place to start. So, for example, who are my customers? What is my revenue? What is my margin? What are those foundational metrics that you have to run your business? You'd be shocked how many custom companies, if you ask them, how many customers do you have of what type? They kind of don't know. Or what's your revenue yesterday? They don't know. Right. And so, if you can't answer the most foundational things, those are the things that you should be focused on. From there, you can build on that, and you can, the sky's the limit.
Okay. So keep going now on the good, bad, the bad, good, and great.
Sure. So bad, it takes over a week to get your response. Okay, you've lobbed it in to whoever, or put in a Jira ticket, or did whatever it is you have to do to get an answer, or the data just doesn't exist, or it wasn't collected, or whatever. That's bad. Okay, so good is less than a week. Okay, and I still think a full week is bad. It's just that out in the market, if you're looking at an average, that's about how long it takes for good companies to get their information. And so, if you have it at your fingertips, that's amazing. But good would be like, oh, well, I came up with this new idea, and we're going to try a new funnel, or we're going to try a new channel, or we're going to try a new thing, and we need a new data source. Okay. And that's the key here. Once it's all plugged in, it's probably available to you. It's that you have a new idea, and you need a new data source. And so we want to be able to connect that data source, or that tool, or that thing in less than a week. Okay. There's no reason that can't happen. It just often doesn't. And so that would be what we would talk about as good.
Okay. So let's keep moving. The difference we talk, I guess, from your analysis, it looks like 85% of those folks are sales led versus product led in terms of growth. It's funny, if you've talked about how in the deck you mentioned that AI is blurring these lines. So what's that mean from a tech stack standpoint if everybody's kind of going to be somewhere between sales led and product led? And we hear lots and lots about even on enterprise purchases where so much of the purchase process is self sort of led, right? Self-service. I'm imagining that is part of that thinking, but talk a little bit about how the tech stack has to evolve have these more product-like experiences.
Well, I think the key to product like is that the salesperson is, in PLG or product led growth, you're sort of taking somebody through their journey with your technology, with your site, and you're able to sort of convince them to buy without having to talk to go through this intense sales process. Obviously, the price of the product and the time it takes to sell and the level of integration, or the difficulty in understanding it matters. We're very, very quickly going to get to a place where most salespeople need an SE on the call to help them sell the deal, right?
Right.
So it's like, oh, I can sell it, and I can set up the meetings, and I can do the thing. I still need an SE. Okay, fine. There's a relationship there. You're building a relationship with the customer. The SE comes in, kind of answers all the questions. We're not too far away from a place where the SE is just a bot.
Right.
Like, okay, I don't really need an SE. I can just kind of answer your questions right now. I don't even need to set up that meeting next week. I can set it up today. As long as you're available, we can hop on the call and I can answer these things, right? And the mechanism for that may be that there's somebody, the SE bot is listening in on the conversation, and it's just answering, in a window in real time while the salesperson is talking. We're not that far away from a place where the salesperson is somebody that looks like me on a call like this, and you don't know the difference. Uh, it's just not a real person, right? And so we start to blur the lines because what is PLG if there's no, or what is SLG if there's no salespeople, right? And we've already reached a point where if you're, you have a massive team of BDRs, you probably want to rethink how you're running that team because, for every, you know, 10 BDRs, you should probably only have one and then maybe zero, right? And start to think about that process. And that's where the line blurs.
And it's so interesting in folks at the Super Huddle, we had Amanda Kahlo doing interesting things at One Mind with exactly what you're talking about. But I think it's almost, there's a slight nuance in here, which is I don't think people ever want to talk to a sales rep. They want to talk to somebody, a subject matter expert. And so while yes, the subject matter, the machine may be able to do that better, I feel like if the human's going to play a role, but figuring out a way to make your salespeople more subject matter experts, so is part of the solution. And one of the ways obviously is, yeah, they have a bot as an assistant, so suddenly they have superhuman intelligence, but still, I think there's some interesting convergences that could happen here.
No question. And the reality is, what subject matter expertise? A lot of it isn't about your tool, it's about understanding the pain of your customer. And so, fundamentally, if you have an expert that can think about different industries and sizes of companies and people and look up, the history of the business and weave the story in automatically, they're going to be better salespeople. And it will get to the pain and it will be able to describe the ultimate solution in a way that, quite frankly, today is often just sort of fluff and relationship building. And so I think that also creates a situation for companies that maybe the technology isn't quite where it needs to be, right? And the sale is selling. And I think, we're going to have to navigate those opportunities and ultimately be better marketers, right? Because at the end of the day, marketing beats product. And so we have to continue to market. We have to continue to weave our story and tell our story and train the bot to tell the story the way we want it told. Because if we don't do that, it's just going to be, an SME.
You know, it's funny if I had a group of this, if our audience was CEOs and they were listening here, they'd say, what do you mean marketing beats product? Product beats marketing every single day of the year. Just make a great product and get the marketing out of the way. Why do you,
It's not
what,
true.
really?
Yeah, look, I mean, just go down the list of crappy products that are well marketed and sold. I mean, Salesforce is the number one, offender, right? So, I mean, there's still Marketo in the market. Like, that's crazy. I mean, there's like, Salesforce Marketing Cloud has more revenue than all the other companies combined, and it's literally the worst product. So, I think the case can be made over and over and over again that great products don't win. Sales and marketing always wins.
All right. I hope all of you, this is as inspiring to all of you beaten down CMOs or being told to cut your budgets by 80% to go do this so that they can spend more on product. Marketing beats product. All right. We've there's so much more that you covered in the deck that we're not going to be able to cover. And before I ask you to look for the future, is there any one thing from the analysis that we haven't covered that you want to make sure that we do?
I think I think the only thing is just that there's this like massive divergence and massive array of different tools that everybody's bought. And I think the first thing is um, oftentimes as a CMO, you get stuck with whatever was there when you got there, and that's fine. So know when your contract dates are up, because if they're up in a month, there's probably not a whole lot you can do about it. But if they're up in like 6 months, you can start thinking about and planning for what the future might look like. And I think that's the key takeaway, which is you might be stuck with what you have today. You don't have to be stuck with, where you want to go tomorrow. And because everything's changing so fast, you should keep that in mind. And I think the second thing is, like I wouldn't sign a long-term deal anymore, almost at any cost. And the reason is the thing that you're buying today is probably going to be obsolete tomorrow. And so, outside of having to, stick with Salesforce because you have to, because salespeople don't know how to do anything else, There are opportunities today to like open up, pick your head up, look at what other great companies are doing to, you know, get the most out of these shrinking budgets by leveraging some of these new technologies. But these new technologies are evolving fast, and the playing field is changing every day.
Well, and this is sort of a great thing and a curse. I mean, if you think about it just from a consumer electronics standpoint, in your next iPhone, it's like, well, the next one's, I'm going to wait for the next version. I'm going to wait for the next version, and it's going
Right.
to be that much better. And so you kind of have to, I mean, what you're saying is a lot's going to change, but that could give you paralysis. So, right. I like the short-term contract aspect, but you still got to go out and solve problems today. And CMOs are under the gun to show improvement quickly, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. And so they can't put, if their tech stack isn't delivering the information that they need today, they got to fix that. And they have
Now
to
they got to
fix it.
fix it. Okay, fine. I'll recalibrate.
Okay.
So as you're evaluating new systems, make sure that you own and can access the data so that if you want to move later, you can. So can I get the data into the warehouse? Do I have the ability to, um, you know, sync the data? And if you do, there's less sort of you don't have like a ball and chain on your neck, right? And so maybe there's ways to do that are less painful. I hear you though. You got to move, but I also recognize the reality on the ground. A lot of people are
Right.
stuck with what they're stuck with, and so we need to make the most out of that.
Okay. We're looking at the future, this what the stack looks like. We're gonna sort of put on the things, and I'm having an Iron Man moment, a Tony Stark moment, where I'm imagining I've got my screen, I can interact with my bot, and I'm saying, "Hey, I want to look at the data a little bit differently. How are we doing over here?" And just wave my hand the way Tony did. Is that how we're gonna get there anytime soon, or what's the next in your mind, the
12
future
months.
ahead? What's that?
12 months. It's 12 months. So think about it like this. Even today, if we can get all the data, accurate, reliable, consistent, accessible data in the warehouse. And here's the key, by the way. If you have bad data, the AI is going to completely be crazy. Okay, it's going to hallucinate. It's going to tell you the wrong things. It's going to come up with insights that are actually absolutely wrong. And so that sort of data foundation matters more than ever today. And so let's say we get the data in the warehouse from the systems and from your sort of source of truths. And now we want to do things. We want to send emails. We want to generate reports. We want to, understand our customer. What do I need an interface for? Why can't I just ask the bot or the AI or the interface the answer to the question that I want the answer to? Why do I have to splunk around and generate reports, right? Like the only reason we generate reports is because we want to find the insight or the trend or the whatever. And so it would be better and quite frankly, a lot more efficient to say, tell me the customers that I should be sending a certain email to, or create an audience for me that does create the most profitable audience for me and send an email to them with the right copy at the right time. Okay. Um, there's a human in the loop. So you're still going to see what the thing is, and they're going to come up with a, flow, and you're going to go, yeah, that looks right. Enter. And it's going to happen.
And
That's going to
then
happen.
that's sort of the agenic future where you sort of describe the thing and then it just sort of does it with a couple of touch points to make sure that it's not hallucinating. Um, initially I was just imagining that this is the equivalent of ChatGPT. It's an answer engine that's going to, with all the right data in your own little sandbox, going to be able to sort of answer any question in real time so that you don't necessarily, because you could say, hey, I need a report for the board. These are the four
Well, yeah, but
things.
you just say generate my board report. There's a template already, and already you have an agent for board report, board reporting, and it just generates it.
Right. And so
So, and yeah,
presumably you've already agreed with the board what those metrics are. So in this future, you're thinking that this information, if it's constructed right, will be and I want to make sure repeat the words: accurate, reliable, consistent. There was a fourth.
well, accessible.
Accessible. Okay. There it is. That, and to me, accurate, we've already sort of nailed, really important, and that's why the CDP reliable, consistent, because you got to keep coming in. But ultimately, this future you're describing is an amazing leap in accessibility.
And here's the thing, if you are a CMO and a thought leader, you will be more important than ever. If I was an IC, I'd be looking at new careers. I
If
mean,
you
at
were a
the end of
what?
the individual contributor, like I'm just your like marketing manager or your PPC buyer or your email orchestrator or your whatever, any title with like manager, like CRM manager, like, those things end up sort of not being needed pretty soon. Now you can keep them, you just don't need them.
Well, you use them for something else,
Maybe.
uh,
I mean, what are we going to do
presumably.
with all those BDRs that, we don't need anymore?
Put them to work on something else. Train them how to be amazing. I mean, there are those many folks who just imagine a future where you have 1,000 digital bot employees doing your work, and I suspect that will be true. However, I also think that it's going to be the judgment that's going to figure out, oh, that's different.
I don't know. I mean, human in the loop. You still need a human in the loop. So there's still a person. But like, for example, if you have five people working on email, you only need one person working on email. And so the question becomes, can we do more better marketing? Yes. Does that require thought leadership? Yes. And so again, if you can think, this world is your oyster.
Ryan, this has been amazing, eye-opening. Before we wrap up, what's sort of one action you recommend every CMO in our audience take in the next week based on your research?
Oh man, put me on the spot.
You bet, baby.
Just, calibrate around the expectations of your team, your company, and your data organization on whether you are good or bad or great in your data accessibility. So, if it's takes you more than a week, you need to set up some meetings and, bang on your desk and, make it better.
Okay. Clearly, you are an expert in this area. One, where can people find you, and what's an engagement with you look like?
Yeah, so I'm at Ryan at growthbench.com. You can check us out at growthbench.com. We have a sister company, Mammoth Growth, which does all of our data work. You can email me, and an engagement with us typically looks like you send me an email with your stack, and I tell you what your pain is and see if that aligns. And then we figure out a way to go fix it.
Go fix it. All right, Mr. Fix It for TechStack. All right, Ryan Koonce, thank you so much.